let's talk about The Mandalorian and all that great footage that we all had to watch bootlegged online because I guess we're back to not showing footage at these panels. What is this, Comic-Con? Come on now. So, The Mandalorian, this is a show that I think a lot of people are very excited for, especially if you're not into the sequel trilogy. If The Last Jedi turned you off from those movies, I've noticed a lot of people who have kind of lost faith in where they're going with the films have poured all their excitement and passion into this new series. This show is going to cover an aspect of Star Wars that the movies really don't. We've really only seen the movies dive into kind of like the underworld bounty hunter type of Star Wars. We really only saw that for like one scene, an incredible scene, but one scene in A New Hope, and we got it in Solo, which is the movie that nobody showed up to see. So I get why people are excited for this. If you love Star Wars for kind of like the Wild West bounty hunter aspects of it, then I mean, you got to be losing your mind for this show. So let's talk about the actual footage. I don't know what's up with Lucasfilm. Sometimes they do these ingenious things, and sometimes they do things that's like, why? Why not stream the footage? So the footage is out there. It's available to anybody who wants it, but it's shot from like somebody's iPhone who was there. Well, it looks a lot. My first thoughts as I was watching it was it looks incredibly like Rogue One. And if you love Rogue One, then you should be losing your mind, because this movie, like, if you told me this was like a deleted scene from Rogue One, I might believe you. If you've been watching my stuff for the short amount of time that I've been doing this, I've mentioned several times, Rogue One is my least favorite Star Wars movie. That movie doesn't really have a lot of what I love about Star Wars packed into it. So looking at this footage and seeing that, oh, this looks like my least favorite Star Wars movie, not really getting me super excited for this. People who like Star Wars just for like people who love Rogue One, where it's like I love the big battle sequences and it's badass and Darth Vader in the hallway is, you know, incredible. Like, they just want Star Wars to be like strictly for adults all the time, and that's fine. That's totally fine. Not really where I live when it comes to Star Wars. That's what this show is kind of looking like to me, which makes me a little nervous. Like, there's one scene where they have like an evil guy with stormtroopers. He says like burn them all or burn it, and they're like burning villages. The color palette it's very like, it's all browns and grays and all kind of looks like just blah. Like, if this is based off of like Sergio Leone westerns, spaghetti westerns, things like that, those movies weren't like bursting with color, but they were still beautiful with how those were shot and how color was used in that, and they were incredible still to look at. And this just looks like blah, gray and brown and different shades of gray and brown. That's visually, this show is doing nothing for me so far. One of George Lucas's biggest inspirations for New Hope was John Ford, who shot westerns, these big, giant, beautiful landscape shots that were bursting with color. And people forget that really the first hour of A New Hope, it's a western. It takes place in a desert. They go to a cantina. They meet a cowboy in the form of, or an outlaw in the form of Han Solo. Shoots a guy at the bar. Like, it's the first hour. Some people would argue the whole film is a big western, but really, like, the first hour that we spend in half the film is like a big western. So we've seen this before. I'm intrigued. Like, where are we gonna go with this? Is this gonna catch my eye? Like, oh my god, this is like a spaghetti western and I love it? Or is it gonna be like, oh, this is like Rogue One and it's just about being badass and burning things and firefights and super awesome characters all the time? They're taking a very similar to Rogue One, which had a kind of a very like less fantasy, more kind of gritty real world look and approach. The way this is shot, the way that it looks, even down to the color palette that they're using for this. If you love your Star Wars to be very real world and like badass all the time, then this show seems like it's going to be very much for you. It does seem like this show is going to be void of fantasy. That's a bummer for me, but at the same time, I don't really know that this show is for me. So you can break down everyone's love of Star Wars into the war aspect of it, the rebellion, the empire, stormtroopers, space battles, the force aspect of it, which is Jedi and Sith and good and evil and, space magic. That's the stuff that I love about it. And then there's the underworld kind of Han Solo, Boba Fett, Jango Fett type of bounty hunter culture, which is what this show is going to be about. So the fact that there's no fantasy element to it that I can see, and it is very real world, I really shouldn't be complaining about that, because that's really not what they're going for. My interest is kind of dwindling. I wasn't losing my mind for the show to begin with. I will say, though, at the panel, this is what makes me hopeful, because the footage did not blow me away. I actually think it wasn't the piece of footage that they showed. It wasn't the best thing to show as, like, there's your first glimpse at this new thing. They gave us essentially an exposition scene, which is not how you hook anybody on a show. Pedro Pascal, who's playing the Mandalorian, he's playing the lead, he mentioned how his character is very heavily inspired by Clint Eastwood, which, I mean, watching this footage, one of my top 10 favorite movies of all time, and in what is, in my opinion, the greatest Western ever made, which is For a Few Dollars More. Footage opens with the Mandalorian sitting at a table with Carl Weathers' character, which, by the way, another one of my favorite movies of all time that's not Star Wars is Rocky, so it's really cool to see Apollo in Star Wars. But he basically taking bounties, going over, like, what bounties do you want? This is what I have, and he offers him kind of like a high-stakes job. That scene, right out of a Western, and not like a gritty spaghetti Western. Very Clint Eastwood. So I like it for that aspect of it. I'm interested in for that. The saving grace for my interest in this show is that if this is going to be Star Wars Wild West, the show, then maybe it'll grab my attention, and maybe I'll love it. I hope so. Another aspect that I really loved, and Jon Favreau talked about this at the panel, this takes place, I believe they said 5 years. I thought it was 3 years, but I believe in the panel they said 5 years after the fall of the Empire. Jon Favreau said he was interested in that time period specifically because, looking at history, which I love, usually when big rebellions and big shifts in power happen, when a previously dictated and governed body of people now have won the right to govern themselves, usually what happens in history is that it's all, you know, big celebrations and 4th of July for like a couple days, and then reality sets in, like, oh, we have to do all this stuff for ourselves now, and we don't really know how to. And that's what it seems like this show is going to be about, which is that, yeah, the Empire is gone, but this takes place in that adjustment period where nobody really knows what they're doing, and it kind of turns the galaxy, in a way, into, like, the Wild West, where it's like, okay, who's going to take charge? Who's taking charge? The Mandalorian's contact that's giving him this job, he is clearly a Empire supporter, and there are stormtroopers there, and their armor is all dirty and gross, and it's because, I mean, these guys don't have an empire to serve anymore. So I like that. Also, another thing, I was very surprised at the panel when Kathleen Kennedy came out and she introduced Jon Favreau. Going into this, we all just assumed, oh, this is going to be the Jon Favreau show. Jon Favreau was introduced with Dave Filoni. They came out together. That was shocking to me, because the way that this panel is represented, this isn't the Jon Favreau show. This is like a Dave Filoni, Jon Favreau, like, joint venture. I'm, like, shocked by that. We all kind of raised an eyebrow when we heard, like, oh, you know, Dave Filoni is going to be directing an episode of The Mandalorian. Oh, good, he's breaking into live action. Then we heard, oh, it's the pilot? Oh, and if you know anything about TV, the pilot is usually directed by, like, the creator of the show, because it's the thing that sets the tone for all the rest of the show to come. Everybody's going to follow what you're doing after that first episode. I just assumed, oh, Jon Favreau is going to direct it. Oh, no. Oh, Dave Filoni's directing it. That's interesting. And then we heard that he's not just a director, he's an executive producer. Could mean a lot of things, but often that means he's incredibly involved with the storytelling and the decision making of, like, what's going to happen in the show. And now Dave Filoni's coming out on stage with Jon Favreau as if, like, this is, like, their project together, like they're equals on it. That was shocking. That was shocking to me, and that's super exciting. So the third reason why I'm being positive about the show is because it's Dave Filoni. And I love him. I always say it. He's the heir apparent. He was the last student of George Lucas. This show is clearly going to be, I think, a stepping stone for Dave Filoni to go, you know, from animation to now he's on live action. And now after this, let's move on to a film. Let's do it. Give him a movie. That's pretty much all we got for footage. Things I don't like about it. It reminds me a lot of Rogue One. It's clearly going to be probably void of fantasy. Again, this is only like one clip, and, you know, should they have shown something that's not an exposition scene? Maybe, but, you know, we'll see. Also, interesting point in the exposition scene. The Mandalorian is receiving some kind of like tracker or something. The tracking number that they're giving him, they mention, is 50 years old. That dates back pre Phantom Menace in the timeline. 23 years, 33 years, 38. So if my math is right, this show is taking place 38 years after Phantom Menace. I think my math's right on that. So this is dating back 12 years before Phantom Menace. What is this gonna be? What is the bounty? What is he going after that he needs to bring back, dead or alive? That the tracking signal that he's being given is 50 years old. That was interesting. Overall, I'm interested in this show because it's Star Wars. It's the first live action thing. And also, to be fair, I have not been very high on the TV shows, the live action TV shows. I was very happy with Star Wars, live action Star Wars being on film and animation occupying the show space. Obviously, the future of Star Wars is going to be very different. The two shows that we know about is The Mandalorian, which is bounty hunter stuff, and the Cassian Andor show, which is going to be like a spy rebellion thing. After the failure of Solo, I think what is happening now is Star Wars on the big screen is going to be all Force-centric stuff. So the Benioff and Weiss thing, even though they haven't said it, is very clearly going to be Old Republic, which is Jedi and Sith. We're probably going. I would be shocked if we're not going back to the time where Sith had an empire and it was a big giant Jedi Sith war. I can't wait. The Rian Johnson thing. I loved Rian Johnson's explanation of the Force in The Last Jedi. I would be shocked if his trilogy doesn't have to do heavily with the Force. We've also heard that his trilogy may or may not be about like Harry Potter, but like a Jedi temple, which is interesting. That's just a blatant rumor. It could be totally wrong. My point being, all the Star Wars projects that we know about coming towards us, I would be shocked if they're not Force-centric. And it looks like what they're doing now is that the films, which is what I care about the most, are going to be Force-centric stuff. And the TV shows are going to be more of the underworld bounty hunter stuff, rebellion, all the non-Force stuff is what the shows are going to be about. I've speculated for a long time. I don't be surprised if we hear about a Alden Ehrenreich, Han and Chewie show coming to a Disney streaming service near you. So it looks like the future of Star Wars is going to be the Force stuff is going to be in the films, and everything else is going to occupy the TV space. If that's the way it's going to be, I'm totally fine with that. I mean, as much as if this does turn out to be The Man with No Name in Star Wars, I'll be a little disappointed that it's not a film. My favorite piece of Star Wars, which is the Force, is occupying my favorite piece of Star Wars, which is the films. So this is a pretty good situation for me, I think. So overall, the footage, I'm intrigued. I'm not losing my mind for it. I don't love it. I'm interested. I see potential. There are things I don't like about it. There are things I do like about it. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. There it is. There's my thoughts on it. The Mandalorian, streaming November 12th. They did confirm that this is going to be a launch title, which we kind of already knew, but, it's nice to have confirmation. So very exciting. I mean, I will say that's pretty great that we get a live-action Star Wars show that could turn out to be really interesting and hopefully great right before we get the conclusion of the Skywalker saga for now. So yeah, good times, great times to be a Star Wars fan. We got more stuff to talk about coming up. We're gonna dive more in, I think, to that Star Wars trailer. I got some more things and theories to talk about when it comes to that. So until then, bye.